The perfect investment vehicle is of course subjective, and this is because every investment vehicle offers certain things that others might not. But in the context of dividend growth investing or buying into dividend paying stocks or ETFs that not only have the potential to move up in price over time, but also pay dividends from day one and pay more and more in dividends long term. If that's exactly what we're talking about, there is a specific perfect dividend growth investment that I've been buying like crazy over the last several years. Now in this video, we're going to talk about exactly why the SCHD ETF or the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF has shown us time and time again that it really is the perfect dividend growth style ETF across the entire markets. We're going to talk about exactly how this ETF works, the ETF's performance, and of course, how many shares of SCHD I have as of right now, and how much dividend income this means I'm going to be earning long term. So if you consider yourself a dividend growth investor, make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into this one. Real quick for those that haven't already, make sure to go to the first link in my description and grab my new dividend investing ebook where I share exactly how I went from $0 invested to now earning over $6,000 on a monthly basis and over $1 million invested in the markets. Along with the ebook, you're also going to receive my custom dividend tracker where you can track your dividend progress on an ongoing basis and reach your dividend investing goals. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. Now before we go any further, are there other dividend growth style ETFs and other dividend growth style stocks across the market that not only have outperformed SCHD over certain time frames and or are great investment options also? The answer to that, of course, is yes. And that's why I think it's great to have a diversified portfolio and not just hold on to one single asset long term. But once again, if we're talking about dividend growth and finding the perfect or quote unquote perfect dividend growth style vehicle, SCHD has shown us time and time again over history. And we're going to go through this, why this investment vehicle might just be the perfect one size fits all for most dividend growth investors out there. Now, just for a recap, this ETF's objective is to track as closely as possible before fees and expenses the total return of the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index. And this is an index that we've talked about a lot on this channel. We've went over exactly how this index works and why its performance has been so outstanding over most time frames. And if you're not exactly aware of how this index works, go back on some of my other SCHD videos because we've talked about this index quite a bit. But to go back to the basics, if you will, because that's really what I want to talk about on this video. I want to go over exactly why this ETF, in my opinion, might be the perfect one size fits all best investment vehicle out there for dividend growth style investors. Now, if you're a dividend growth investor, there's going to be a few certain things you are definitely going to be looking for. And I know this for certain because I personally am what you consider a dividend growth investor. You first are going to want to have an investment that's going to be either cheap or free to hold on to. In this case, SCHD, of course, is a fund and ETF, so it does have an expense ratio, but the expense ratio is very, very cheap at just 0.06%. This means that over time, if you are going to be like myself and own hundreds or maybe even thousands of shares of SCHD long term, or any fund for that matter, it's not going to cost you all that much because 0.06% is barely going to be noticeable. Now, on top of that, as a dividend growth investor, you're going to want to own investment vehicles that not only pay dividends and pay more and more dividends over time, but you're also going to want your investment to move up in price long term. Now, as of filming this video, SCHD is basically almost trading towards the upper end of the last 52-week range, which just once again shows that this ETF has the power to come back. And I say that because it wasn't all that long ago that SCHD was trading in the mid 60s, and a lot of investors, even long-term holders of SCHD, started to write off this ETF for dead. But because of this ETF's underlying index that it tracks, the methodology, this ETF consistently holds on to high quality dividend growth names, which we're going to go through in a second, that have the potential to keep moving up and up in price long term, which is why this ETF has performed so well. Now, to be more specific, this ETF is up around 210% on the max time frame, and this is just as far as price return goes. Which means if you bought this ETF around 12 or 13 years ago, you would have not only made a triple on the investment as far as price return goes, but you also would have earned dividends every single quarter and more in dividends long term. Now, this ETF's holding breakdown is as follows. It's mostly financials as of right now: healthcare, consumer defensive, industrials, energy. Then the rest of the ETF is consumer cyclical. We have a small portion technology, communication, basic material, and utilities. Now, depending on sort of what cycle we're in the market, certain sectors are of course going to get more love than others. And the next cycle that we're going to be heading towards in the next few years, where interest rates are hopefully going to be much lower than they were over the past several years, I think a lot of these names are going to get even more love than they have over the last few. Now, the top 10 names in SCHD as of right now, these are of course going to change over time. And that's because this ETF is ever changing year after year. But as of right now, names like Amgen, Texas Instrument, the Home Depot, BlackRock, abbvie, Verizon, Cisco, Lockheed Martin, we have Chevron, Coca-Cola, around 100 different holdings overall. And all these holdings have the potential to move up in price over time and have a history of paying dividends and more in dividends long term, which brings us into the next portion of why I think this ETF is possibly the #1 or one of the best dividend growth ETFs across the entire market. SCHD has a trailing 12-month dividend yield of around 3.6–3.7%, but maybe even more impressive than that, one of my favorite aspects about this ETF. You see the chart of dividends over time, and one thing's for certain, this ETF has paid more and more in dividends long term ever since the inception of this fund, where it paid a 12-cent quarterly dividend. This is back in 2011. Now, this is very important, especially for those of you that are watching this video that don't have as much cash balance as maybe some other investors. I know when I started dividend investing, it took a while to really build up my cash balance and really get my dividend growth portfolio to the point to where it was earning a lot of dividend income. But the magic part is that if you invest into high quality dividend growth ETFs like SCHD that consistently has paid more and more in dividends long term, the way that it works is simple. You're going to buy a share of SCHD for say $70 or $80 per share, and even if you're getting paid, let's say 75, 80 cents, whatever the case might be, the idea is that long term, this ETF is going to pay you more and more in dividends over time. And of course, that is not for certain, that's not guaranteed, but at least going off of historical data, we see that it's happened so far. This ETF is definitely not lacking performance over time. If we look at the long term, over the last 12.72 years, which is about how long this ETF has been out, a $10,000 investment would now be worth almost $45,000, with an average annual total return of around 12.5%. Now, I can't speak for everyone, but as a long-term dividend growth investor, I'm very happy with even 7, 8, 9, 10%, but over time on average, a 12.5% return, this is going to potentially make your investment stretch a lot further, a lot longer, especially if we see some massive dividend increases like we have historically. Now, lastly, talking about my specific investment as of right now with SCHD, as of right now, I currently hold around 636 shares of this ETF with an average cost of around $73.22 per share. Now, because SCHD is trading nearly $80 per share, that means that for one, I'm up substantially as far as price returns, as far as paper gains, but more importantly to me as a long-term investor, my yield on cost is much, much higher, which means that I bought SCHD at a lower price, so my dividend yield, or how much I'm earning off of the actual dividends as far as yield goes, is much higher than that if I were to buy more shares today. Which, side note, I'm still buying shares of SCHD almost every single day. Now, don't get me wrong, like I said towards the beginning of the video, there's tons of other good dividend growth names out there. SCHD, DGRW, VU, there's tons of names out there that I have substantial historical data to go off of. But for those investors out there, maybe that came across this video that are looking for the one size, if there is, of course, a one size fits all investment vehicle for a dividend growth investor that wants to see their portfolio move up over time, but also want to get paid dividends and more dividend income long term, SCHD, or the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, I've said it before and I'll say it again, is a great investment vehicle to look into. But now lastly, most importantly, I want to hear from you guys down below. If you're currently a dividend growth investor that holds any shares of SCHD as of right now, how many shares do you currently have across all your portfolios? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.